director of the Alliance for Quality Education. We will be recording this conversation so we can share it later and reflect back on it. We're super excited about this. It's an exciting moment, exciting time, that the possibilities of a new system, a system that is community-led, community-driven, can be created. And part of this conversation is to make sure that we not get caught up in what was and what is, but to unpack both those things so we can create a system that is just for all our children, for all our communities, right? So before we get started, our little icebreaker, we're going to ask you to put it in the chat as we are growing in numbers, which is really exciting. The question is, what is one thing you know about mayoral control? And in that process, if you can do that and putting that in, can you put where you're from, borough, district, however you want to define yourself. If you're an educator, a parent, youth, however you want to define elected official, please put that in the chat too with the response to your question. What's your so what's your name, pronouns, where are you from, and what is one thing you know about mayoral control? Thank you, Smith. That was very more succinct than I said it. So we want to see some folks pop in there. I don't see anybody. Maybe you're still writing your answers. But as we are growing in this conversation, I will read some out in a minute. But for now, I'll just say, again, this is a conversation we're having. We have a moment here that we haven't had before. I know many times fear has stopped many of us from having this conversation around actually getting rid of mayoral control to create a system that is more just. And that's understandable because many folks, that's all they know is this system. And also we have folks who peddle in fear and not possibility. And we want to encourage you, us as AQE and Education Council Consortium, want to encourage you to peddle in possibilities because it is possible. I think this election was an example of coming from 1% to winning, making the impossible possible. And we as AQE, and I would say ECC as well, believe that with deep organized and deep commitment from everybody, we can do whatever what we think is possible. We can get it done. So I'll read a few of those out and then I'll start. So we have a great panel. So I'm excited to introduce folks. Tessa from Brooklyn. Hi, Tessa. Mayoral control is disruptive and snuffs out community voice. LMQ. Wow, we got some of the OGs here. Parent advocacy. Jonathan Halibi, him, retired. Y'all going so quick. I'm missing everything. I know that mayoral control is brought in by.
I'm not that old.
I didn't say old. I said an OG. Come on, Ellen. I'm an OG. I mean, come on. I consider myself an OG. Robert's an OG. Don't mean you old. You just wise. Okay. Is that better?
I'll go with, let's do WG.
What is that? Oh, come on. OG is cooler though. Mayoral control is profoundly undemocratic and only seen in non-white dominant cities, said Kamala. I know that mayoral control is up for renewal in the state budget next year, said Elena. And then Elizabeth said, nope, I'm not going to do Elizabeth because has disappeared from me too. But Andrea Ortiz said mayoral control is a type of governance system that is not democratic. All right, so I don't think anybody has a wrong answer. It's like how you perceive it and how you experience it. But we're going to get into this because it's enough for me. We want to hear from the folks who have some more information to share than me. But please we're going to save this chat. Please keep putting your stuff in there. Introduce yourself. And what is one thing you know about mayoral control? All right, cool. So a little bit of context set, and then we're going to go right into the panel. So for today, what we know is the system isn't working, and that this is part of an effort to imagine a new system, right? We can look at the system of the old mayoral control and how it was, and at what we're saying that it's not working now, and not how it was, how it is. And I'm sure there's things in it that work, right? And that's fine. But the system as a whole is not working for some of the reasons that are actually in that chat. We believe, us in ECC, Education Council Consortium, that we need a new system that is not the old system and not the current system. And again, I encourage you to envision large and deep. If a system is not working, what can we create in its place? And if you knew about the old system and there were things that were going wrong, we don't have to recreate the old system either, right? There's something in the middle that gets us to justice and freedom and a way for community to have voice again, for accountability to still happen so that our schools are that the system is accountable to our children. It can happen, right? So I just want you to expand your mind and believe that it can happen. It is not going to be easy. It's not supposed to be. Democracy is not easy. It is crunchy. It is messy, but it is beautiful, and we don't want to lose it. And right now in the system we have, we don't necessarily have a democratic process, right? So to unpack this some more, and let me just give a little context. When I first got involved in education justice work, it was like 1998. I caught the tail end of school boards, right? And I was in District 18 in Brooklyn, and I didn't know enough of anything, to be quite honest, to judge whether it was bad or things were not okay. I knew I got to go to a meeting. I got to hear what was going on. I got to share my story. And it was a process that happened on that stage with school board members where they actually talked it out and things happened. And so when mayoral control came up in 2000 under Bloomberg, for me, what I heard was like, I didn't know enough to even fight it and say, this is not gonna work. I don't like this thing. I didn't know, right? And it was through the process of organizing and learning, one, that when you put in something, anything, it doesn't have to be the system, that is centered on centralizing your power. That means that there's going to be a group of folks, usually people that look like me, that are left out of that group of power. That's just history. That's not brain science to know that when people are trying to consolidate power, generally Black and brown poor people are not the ones that are part of that narrative, right? And so over these last 25 years or so, 20 years of mayoral control, which you're going to hear from this amazing panel, it was something that I learned of having children and organizing, that it was a system that really shut out parent voices and has shut out parent voice, youth voice, educator voice, anybody's voice who's counter to what actually the mayor says. And the last thing I'll say is that we also found that it doesn't necessarily mean who the mayor is, because the system in itself tends to be flawed, right? We had a Mayor de Blasio in office, and this is me saying this. I think if he was strong enough to stand up, Chancellor Carranza could have done more. But he didn't, he wasn't able to, but because the mayor had mayoral control, he could say, you know what, I'm not going to do the thing, and here we are. So I want to introduce the panel. They're going to give a brief introduction, a 5-minute presentation on what worked well and what didn't work well. And they're going to introduce themselves a little bit in the front end. So we ask you, again, any questions put in the chat. You will have time to ask questions later. So, and also we're recording this, okay? So first, is Senator Cleare is here? Have we seen her yet? So we're expecting Senator Cordell Cleare. We have Senator Robert Jackson. We have Ansley Erickson, educational historian. We have the one and only Heather Lewis, educational historian, and Margaret Kelly, who was a former New York City school board member. So we're about to hear some really good information. Get your papers, take your notes. We will record it, but I think and lastly, I'll just say this is one of 3 series that we will be doing with Education Council Consortium around school governance. So this is just one, and towards the end, we'll have some dates for the other ones. So invite your friends. So I'm going to start off. I don't see Senator Cleare yet. I'm going to start off with Senator Robert Jackson. Oh, there she, look at that. She just got into the chat. But Robert, maybe you want to go first, and then let's admit her in though. Okay, there she is. Senator Cleare first. There she is. Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, we just introduced you. Robert, you want to go first, and then
go ahead.
And then we'll let you go. You'll go next, okay, Senator Cleare?
No problem. Go right ahead.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm State Senator Robert Jackson, and I represent Northern Manhattan and part of the Northwest Bronx, about 339,000 people in the district. I've been involved since in this process as far as education since we enrolled our oldest daughter, who's now 50 years old, at PSIS 187, our local school. And, they got me involved because they said to my wife, why don't you come join the Parents Association? My wife said, okay, I'll send my husband. And so off I went, and off I learned from mainly all of the people on the Parents Association were mostly women. There were only 3 men and 33 people total. And they schooled me to be involved in the process, not only at the school, but when things happen, it happens. Meaning, what happened was that the person that was on the school board representing from our school was no longer coming to run again. They said, Robert, you should go. We're going to support you. And so wherever I went during that period of time, it was because the Parents Association at PSIS 187 was behind me and whatever I was doing. And so I became a school board member, and I was on the school board first. I'm sorry, but first I was on the Parents Association for 19 continuous years. And then that's a long time, but that's so important in the process. And then on the school board, I was elected to 5 terms of office for 15 years. And so history has it as far as age is concerned. I know that my colleagues on the school board, they elected me the president of the school board for about 7 years, and then off to the city council, where many of you know my involvement in education in the city council. I sued the state of New York with our attorney, Michael Rebell. He was an absolutely star attorney. No matter what, he tried and tried and tried. And I said, he said, there were people on Long Island, they filed a lawsuit, they didn't win, da da da. I said, listen, you are our attorney. Find a way to get it done. And he found a way. CFE, the Campaign for Fiscal Equity versus the state of New York, very, very big, huge case in which we won billions of dollars for the children of New York City and the rest of the state. So when you think you got it all, we don't have it all. As you know, one person, the mayor's in charge. I consider that a dictatorship, and we have to get rid of dictatorships. We have one now. I don't need to tell you where. If you don't know where, then I don't know what you're doing here. But seriously, it's about all of us working together, parents, advocates, attorneys, in order to make sure that we are representing our children and other parents in the school district in order to make education the equalizer. When I say the equalizer, I said because no matter who you are, whether you're black or white, Hispanic, or Asian, rich or poor, education is the equalizer, and that's what Campaign for Fiscal Equity was about. That's what it's about today. That's what about class size is about, and all of the things that we want in an education for our children. And as you know, no matter what grade they're in, they're entitled to free breakfast and a free lunch. And so it's important that we feed our children and treat them right. And that's what this is about. Almost now a million children in New York City public education. So with that, I'm going to stop. There's so much to bite off on that. So, chomp away.
Thank you, Robert. Senator Cleare, you there? The question so thank you for joining us. The question we are asking folks, first, can you, when you introduce yourself, just like where you represent, and then the question is, what is the question? Sorry, my head just went blank. A brief presentation of what worked well and what didn't work well under community control, mayoral control.
Okay. So yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm really honored to be here. I call this maybe the roots or the beginnings of my work in public service. I currently represent the 30th Senatorial District, which is Harlem, West Harlem, the Upper West Side, a significant portion of East Harlem, El Barrio, and a teeny piece of Washington Heights. And I love Robert Jackson, but I think I got the best district, Robert. it's a very diverse, feisty, fighting district. And it's one that cares, like all of our districts, cares about education. I first got involved in this as a school board member as well, myself, because of services that were not available to my child who was in need who was a child with special needs. And though I was in what people may think is a really great district at the time, District 3, I was from the Harlem part of District 3, which runs from 59th Street up to 122nd Street. And at the time, whereas District 3 was doing good, the Harlem part of District 3 was failing. And there were failing schools everywhere to be found. And I knew that this wasn't because our children could not learn. I knew that there were inequities that needed to be balanced out. And that began my fight as a school board member and later on being president of the first CEC that came into play. Now, I remember when the CEC came about, I felt that, and that was a part of mayoral control. One of the primary rights that I felt was taken away was for parents who may not necessarily have been citizens, but had children in our school system. They were able to vote for school board members. They were able to take part in that part of what was happening to their children. And we had a lot of immigrant students, as we do today. And I felt and still feel they have a right. These are their children, and they have a right to be a part of the decision-making process. And that is one thing, in my view, that mayoral control took away and did not allow those parents to participate. I can't say, I think anytime you take away rights from the people, no one knows better than the people and the parents what's good for our children. So anytime you take away those rights, I can't see anything working good with that. Zakiyah, I think there's something really just inherently wrong. It is a dictatorship, as Senator Jackson said, and it's of the worst kind, because you have our most precious commodity, their future, their lives, is in your hands, and you're not the best qualified. So I have always been against it. And I don't think it's the right way. I think schools should be led by community, and they should be led by parents. And we are the ones who should decide what is good. You know, I've been to different schools, and as a senator, even still, I go to different schools, and school communities vary block to block. The needs vary. You could go to one area, and there's a certain need there that community knows for their children. And you can go to another 10 blocks away, and it's something completely different. There may be a dual language need over here, maybe another dual language of another kind over here. It's all different. You know, we may need people who feel like, you know, we need to have more sports or things geared towards older children or tutoring or whatever it is. I think we know schools have their own culture and they have their own vibe. And I just really think that parents are the best, and those are the best run schools, the best run programs are the ones that are run by parents and community, run in a community style rather than from City Hall.
Thank you, Senator. We have some questions for everyone soon. Some more history around this, who's going to take us back from the beginning. I want to introduce Heather Lewis.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Senator Jackson. I have to add, I don't take this off of my 5 minutes. I just want to say you left out an important detail. You walked to Albany. All the way from New York to Albany. He led a march in the midst of the CFE campaign. That was amazing. So I was a school board member in I was a parent of 4 children, first of all, in District 15. I think one of them's on this call, who's a teacher and assistant principal in the city schools. And I served on my local school board for 2 terms. And I then went back to school to try to understand what this school system was all about and studied the history of education. And so I'm now at Pratt Institute, and I'm on my Senate. I'm the co-president of my Senate, and everything I do today, I learned from being on the community school board. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the big system, just because this is what I do, and I love doing it. So bear with me, okay? So we all know that this era of neoliberalism in the city schools is slowly fading, and we're in a real contradictory moment as it fades. And therefore, somebody already said there's possibility for change. That was Zakiyah. So, but Stuart Hall reminds us that in order to move forward, we need to deconstruct the current system, the system we're in. And I think there's people working on this, and Jonathan Greenberg's going to tell us about it at the end, okay? They're looking at mayoral control and really deconstructing it. I'm not going to do that today. But I want to remind you that we had mayoral control, and mayoral control by a managerial class for 50 years in the first half of the 20th century. It was, the managers were in charge of the school system up until the 60s. So what happened? People don't, this history is important because we only hear about the failures of decentralization. So, of course, we know that there was a grassroots civil rights, long civil rights movement in New York City that culminated with community controlled schools. And what were those activists demanding from this managerial class that closed them out? A bureaucracy that was far removed from what was happening on the ground, corruption throughout the school system at a scale unbelievably larger scale than anything that happened under decentralization. A curriculum that didn't represent the majority of the students, an unequal distribution of resources, striking unequal distribution. We would be surprised. And the continuing reality of segregated schools. So we had the community control movement in response to 50 years of mayoral control. So this fight by these grassroots activists of the 60s and 70s was taken up by many people in the room today, looking at Zakiyah and other people, Robert Jackson, CEJ, AQE. I'm using a lot of acronyms, but we can talk about these groups to those of you that don't know, important groups that fought throughout the Bloomberg, the de Blasio, and the Adams administration, right, to hold the city and state accountable for equitable resources and all the things we know, fighting against, school closures and charters and fighting for culturally relevant curriculum. So our mayor-elect is inheriting this legacy, this rich legacy, right? And that legacy needs to be built into the co-governance model that we're heading towards. And part of that, we all know, is about what decisions who can be made, should be made, by whom, and where, right? I'm not going to answer any of that, other than to say, because this has been my work for the last 25 years, is to figure out the instructional focus of whoever controls the city schools. What happens in classrooms and what happens in schools? The instructional core of education. Who makes decisions about that instructional core? So what happened during decentralization? That's what was supposed to happen. The instructional core was supposed to happen closer to the kids, closer to the teachers at the school and the community level. But people didn't really have control over that, okay? Chalkbeat said they did, by the way. Factual error, but a couple of days after the election. So there was only limited control. Why? Well, first of all, there was a central school system that was plagued by the fiscal crisis, and it gave up on the schools, right? Not unlike the city that gave up on the Bronx as the buildings burned. Exact same exact same complete giving up. So the central system also, though, failed to recognize what was working in the local schools and districts, despite the lack of support from the central system, despite the fiscal crisis. This is the 70s going into the 80s. So in places like East Harlem, Harlem, Upper West Side, Bed-Stuy, superintendents appointed by local school boards started working with teachers and parents, established small schools, bilingual programs, culturally relevant curriculum, early childhood education, and new ways of assessing learning. This generation of education activists, parents, and educators, teachers in local school districts, they eventually became instructional leaders in the city and also grassroots activists, right? So they, under mayoral control, well, people didn't go away. They still had this history, this rich history, still continued to work, as we know. But where are we now? Well, we're at the peak of control by the managerial class. Under Adams, right? The literacy, AI initiatives, that this is even a radical shift from Bloomberg and de Blasio, right? Now it is top-down, that's top-down experts, many of them not educators and beholden to corporate interests, who are calling the shots. There really is no longer local control over instruction. So the mayoral act can look past, look to the past, to see what happened during this time, and looks and see what democratic socialism looks like in classroom, schools, and communities. But he needs to provide a vision of instruction, right? What would it look like? What would it look like with teachers who are hired at the local level, working with parents to develop culturally relevant curriculum and pedagogical approaches, who are charged with developing performance assessments that provide valuable information about student learning and how teaching can be improved, and a broader network of support for teachers, okay? And with the belief that teachers are capable of designing, teaching, and assessing a curriculum that meets all student needs. Right now, there is no belief that teachers can do this, none whatsoever, and certainly no belief in parents. But that's the moment we're in, right? That's the contradictory moment we're in. And I think it's important to remember that we can visit the past and we can look at the examples of where educators and parents actually managed to do this, actually managed to achieve this vision despite the worst conditions possible. And they continued throughout the mayoral control era. So we don't need to find these people. We know who they are, but there's a new generation. And that new generation is the one we need to support and cultivate. So that's it.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Hope y'all taking notes. I see stuff happening in the chat. Heather, take a look in there. See if you want to respond to anything. Now I want to bring up Ansley Erickson to give us some more history.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody tonight. My name is Ansley Erickson. I'm a historian at Teachers College, but well before that, I was a teacher in New York City small public high schools for 3 years. I've been a parent, I've been an SLT member, and all of those things, of course, raise the questions that are animating my research as a historian today. So I have a lot of the same kinds of questions that drew Heather back to research are provoking me as well. So I agreed to fill in spots on what Heather left out, and that's a hard job after that beautiful exposition. So this will be a little more spotty, but I want to take up the question of what worked and what didn't, thinking particularly about the decentralization period, because so much of the conversation about so much of the conversation about mayoral control works against this idea of the decentralization period, by which I mean the 1970s to 2002, when there were community school districts that had elected board members. So much of the current conversation treats that as a problem to be described quickly, and therefore something to be, and then mayoral control is supposed to look good against that problem. And that's a convenient simplification, and I think one that we really need to challenge. And so because Heather focused so nicely on instruction and this core question, all of which I agree with, I want to look at a slightly different scale. So if we just think about democracy as a practice, right? Democracy is a practice. Oh my goodness, we should be thinking about that right now. It really matters how much people have opportunity to practice that democracy. And we should think of part of what happened in decentralization as a moment when there was more local practice of democracy than there had been in many of these periods of highly centralized control that Heather just described. And we know, not from New York City data, I don't want to claim that, but we know from national data, this is the work of political scientist Domingo Morel at NYU, that school board offices, elected school board offices, are crucial entry points for people into politics at many levels above. Now, Senator Jackson introduced himself and told that story, and then Senator Cleare introduced herself and told that story, illustrating exactly the point. And there are tons of others that we could think of. There are people who started their political lives in New York as school board members and became borough presidents, if not higher than that, right? So we have lots of examples of simply deciding to have more people in more elected positions with more power in their local communities as an education in democracy, and one that in this case, and this is crucial, brings more people who have not historically been in elected offices into the system. So we're talking about more Black representatives in New York City government, more Latinx representatives in New York City government, right? So this is about democracy. And right now, I think it's really important to name that because we have a democracy under tremendous threat, as we're all well aware. And it is, to just give you some examples, we can also think about moments at many points from the 1970s through the end of mayoral control, through the end of decentralization. I apologize. This is like Zoom number 8 today. I'm going to try to get my words right, but it might be a little bit of a struggle. So through the whole period of decentralization, we have stories about how something happened in a local school that needed attention, that needed work, and people in that local school knew that there were elected people in their neighborhood that they could go to. That itself is very powerful. It didn't always result in an easy solution, but there was a person you could call. And it wasn't a person who, as kind-hearted as they are in a CEC, would say, I hear this concern, but I don't actually have any authority in this operation, right? Instead, it would be a person who understood that they were voted for by you and a person who had some hiring authority in the operation of the local schools in that district. That also really, really matters. And so I'll stop there on thinking about parts of democratic practice in the decentralization era. And then I want to shift to recognizing things that are not that are not quote unquote successes, nor would I say that they are failures. Instead, I would suggest that these are limitations on the story of decentralization in New York City. First of all, as I'm sure many of you are aware, when we talk about elected community school districts in New York City and decentralization, we're talking about K-8 geographic districts. Those are where the community school districts were. So many parts of the system remained highly centralized. High school districts operated at the borough level and did not have the same kind of local democratic control. Some students with disabilities would have been covered inside the community school districts, but many students with disabilities were treated as people who didn't have a place, and there was no democratic structure to support their education. That's true of District 75. And I can say more about why I think that matters. But there are just so many elements, and Heather's points about instruction are really important. There was still a lot of centralized control over instruction, even in the decentralized period. And so this is part of why this call from Zakiyah to peddle in possibilities is so important. We're not talking about going back to the limitations of decentralization. We have to be imagining beyond them to think about what's really fully possible in this period of time. And then finally, Heather mentioned austerity, and I think that's crucial to keep in mind, right? Decentralization, that is this experiment with local democracy, limited as it was in New York City schools, took shape, grew up in the context of incredible financial pressure. There had not yet been the CFE suit, right? The city was in a period of formal austerity from 1975 really until 1995. One of the first things I knew about New York City schools, I didn't grow up here, was that all the arts classes had been cut in 1995, right? So the amount of resources available for the decentralization period was so constrained that inevitably it shapes what happens in that experiment. And so that means, of course, number one, the questions about resources are never, the questions about governance are never going to replace a conversation about resources. But number two, any criticisms of the decentralization period have to keep that in mind. People were really scrapping for resources. People were scrapping for jobs in this period of time. And finally, whatever we do for what I hope is a more robust version of local democratic governance in New York City going forward has to make sure it doesn't repeat this dynamic where people, especially Black and Latinx people in New York, get power at exactly the moment that the system is structurally undercut in ways that's going to make their success that much harder. So I really love this notion of peddling in possibilities. We have rich, small and large examples from the community control period, from the decentralization successes that Heather Lewis is pointing to, and I look forward to imagining with all of you. Thanks for the invitation to be here.
Thank you, Ansley. Apologies for the mispronunciation.
Don't worry, it happens a lot. Not a trouble.
So, last but not least, and we have a few questions, and then we're going to save the last few minutes for some questions and answers. But my friend, Margaret Kelly, was a former, I didn't even know this, former New York City school board member. Margaret. Just
You didn't know
unmute
that?
yourself. There you go. I did not know that.
Oh my God.
I know.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. And I certainly am coming from the ground up. I don't have the intellectual perspective that Heather and Ansley had. So I'm just going to give it to you from the ground. For instance, in 1999, I wrote an op-ed to the local newspaper, and it began like this: ready, aim, fire. Yes, I am a member of the community school board, and I know I have to duck to avoid being knocked down by the usual torrents of accusations that I'm a political hack or a patronage source. The school board image has been so bad that even my children look at me funny. And this is inaccurate. There are many dedicated and involved school board members. Board members that work hard to set policy, they visit schools, they do a lot. So I'm going to just skip to the good parts of the community school boards. School boards had the power to set policy, which drives the budget, create new schools and close ones that didn't work, interview and offer a contract to a superintendent, and then do an annual evaluation of the superintendent. And if in fact they were not happy, they can refuse to renew the contract, thus firing the superintendent, which my school board did. And so they also have a role in reviewing the district budget. And also we created task forces for the needs in the community, which the Central didn't pay any attention to. For example, we had a technology task force because by visiting schools, we learned that all the computers that Loomer was so proud that he stuck in all the schools were sitting in the back of the classroom with plastic on top. because nobody sort of knew exactly how to integrate it into the system. So we created a technology task force with parents and teachers and tech experts and curriculum experts. And we came up with a plan a simple plan that schools and teachers could use to take those plastic covers off them and integrate the computers into the daily learning day. So that was one thing. Then in special education, we had a task force, and we came to the bottom line that was, and this was early before actually people started talking about it. We came to the bottom line that it was ridiculous that special ed children were being bused all over the city. And so we did a resolution to have the superintendent provide special education services in all the schools for the children within that school, so they didn't have to be bused all over the city. Now, what didn't work well is I never felt that the school board represented all of the different factions of the district, and it was pretty white school board for the most part. And we certainly have a mix in District 15. And I thought a lot about that. And I thought the real reason for that is basically school board members have to do things. They have to attend monthly meetings. They have to go to schools. They have to read literature in order to make informed decisions. They have to do a lot. And without any compensation, it leaves out a great many of the different groups in the districts. Parents have to commit to working families have to hire babysitters. They have to spend money for transportation. They have to evaluate time away from work. How many people can do that? So it's an issue that I think has to be addressed, that there be some compensation. And that's a mix across the country. Some do, some don't. But it's some sort of compensation in order to cover the costs for parents who would like to participate, but it's just too expensive. And I think that's what I had. The other thing that they do well is managing the superintendent. It's really, they interview them, they address them, but also here's another example of how Central cannot run the whole system. We had a superintendent who came to a school board meeting and announced that a very popular program was being canceled. It was an after-school reading program. And we all looked around, the board members said, we didn't hear anything about that. So we went away and we asked other boards, and they said they never heard anything about it. So we went to Central and they said, no, we didn't cancel this program. So then we decided to turn it over to the financial department of the Central office, because it didn't make any sense that we were canceling it, nobody else was. To find out he was using our district money as a little piggy bank. And so finally he was removed. Now, without the community school board, he'd probably still be the superintendent and still have his hand in the piggy bank. But so school boards represent ears to the ground. And yes, there are problems with it, but I think that it is really clear that not one person can run the school system. I mean, Bloomberg talked about how 2 or 3 of the school boards were crooked out of 30 some. But guess what? We have a mayor who was indicted. And so would they then recommend we don't have a mayor? I mean, it's like, so that's how I feel about it anyway. So if you have any questions, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I appreciate this forum because we really do need to get this together.
Thank you, Margaret. So there's some stuff in there. So get ready. Just keep getting your questions in your head. I know you must have some, but I'm gonna post some questions to our panel for a few more minutes, and then we'll open it up to everyone else. So first question. So some of the criticisms that come up about community control in New York City schools are allegations of corruption. Margaret, you touched on that a bit, quid pro quo, and dysfunction. In your experience, I'll throw this to whoever wants to answer, but maybe Senator Cleare or Senator Jackson want to kick us off. In your experience, do these criticisms hold true? And what could be done differently to avoid some of these pitfalls? I think some of that information is really helpful as we are, again, this is the first of other conversations. We need to know like the solutions in your best, to the best of your ability. How can we change the thing? So can someone drop that question in the chat so folks can read it? Senator Jackson, Senator Cleare, yes, you off me, go for it.
No, the only thing I want to say is I remember when many of those allegations came out. I have never once witnessed any kind of corruption on my school board. I don't remember them ever proving those allegations to any great degree. If it happened somewhere, and I just think it was used as something, it was a political tool to say we need to stop this one the process and go to this other process. And I think it was there was some racism involved as well in the way this took place, because I never saw the report that showed this high level of corruption that school boards were doing. I know I had a very hardworking school board, and the ones that I had some involvement with District 5, but I was on District 3, School Board District 3, and I never witnessed one day of corruption on that board. And I never saw a significant report after. So I think we have to really be careful. I think there was a lot that was said at the time because people wanted to do a certain thing. And wiping out, to me, what was a better model of school governance is not the way you wipe out corruption. You wipe out the corruption. You go after that, you find it, and you wipe that out. And I just want to take the moment to just really speak to what was said about, the system and how it really made it hard for Blacks to be a part of it, for it to be a part of this system. That's how I really got involved. Someone said earlier that, that coming through the school board kind of is like people become involved politically. And I think maybe we see that because, people are most passionate, I believe, about their children. And that's what you come out for. Everybody that I've ever known, I don't care how sophisticated, how unsophisticated, always wanted a good education for their child, always wanted their child to have a fair shot. And I just think that leadership in general on any issue in our community, whether it's housing, whether it's, the environment, whatever it is, I think that that's where a lot of change comes from. And people just have to be willing to buck the system and be willing to get involved and to make a difference in what's going on in their communities. Yes, and I saw someone put in the chat that there was corruption in their district, and I'm sorry that there was, but I think that there was another way to remedy that. And that wasn't what was behind mayoral control. What was behind mayoral control was another level of corruption, which was, in my view, the very first thing that the mayor called for under mayoral control that I can remember was to put Snapple in our schools. I was like, what? This is the big new thing?
I remember that.
Do you remember that? Wow, yeah, they need some sugar. Let's do that. Get that in there. Yeah, that's what's been missing. So this was, to me, that was somebody's contract or something. I felt like that was something that was corrupt, and I was waiting for this great new plan, but that was one of the first things that I remember. And then there were a number that came after that. Again, I just think there was a bunch of smoke and mirrors, and I just wanted to speak to the fact that I know my board the one that I worked on was a very, very hard working board. I never witnessed any of the corruption that people spoke about. But there were inequities that existed that needed to be addressed in the district. It was a tale of two districts. And that was the thing that I think I battled the most, because when you are trying to create equity, people were trying to give all schools the same amount of resources. Some people needed more. Some neighborhoods needed more. And when you're talking about the Upper West Side versus a place, in South Central Harlem where I was from, you're talking about people with much more resources. You're talking about people that had different incomes and people who were able to support their schools in a different way, as opposed to another group of people who did not have those same resources, and were unable to do it. So that was what I witnessed, was a great deal of inequity. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for that. Senator Jackson, do you want to jump in with anything?
I'm here. Yeah. The bottom line is that's why we want to have transparency and at every level, hold people accountable for the responsibilities that they have, and knowing that there's always going to be someone out there that will put their hand out with some money in it for someone, and people will take advantage of that, and quite frankly, be in the wrong business. This is about our children's education. I've never experienced anything from a point of view of, stealing books or whatever. But I think that people voice it more so than anything else. Just even today, in 2025, there's someone that's always trying to look up where they can make a little bit more money on the side. And so we just need to keep the road straight and walk the straight line. If not, you put yourself out there to be arrested on charges that no one that wants a good education for our children want to be involved with. I know I don't.
Right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. So before someone else wants to respond, it's fine. I'm going to add another question into the queue, though, for you all. And then Ansley, Heather, Margaret, you should jump in and answer either one. So the next one I'm going to add is imagining an equitable functioning school board. What might the configuration look like to you? So feel free to answer either one of those questions. Heather, Margaret, Ansley. Ansley, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in just to go back to the last one. I think there's a figure that I keep on considering in this conversation, which is that I think the average American school district size is like 7,500 kids. This is really helpful to keep in mind, because people talk about such and such is too small, you need big scale to have efficiency. Most US voters can vote for a school board member who represents, in one of 5 or so seats, covering about 7,500 students. That is, roughly speaking, a quarter of the size of most of the community school districts as they were drawn in the 1970s. So the scale here is just so big, and it seems common to sort of think about efforts to break it down as somehow surprising. But the norm is elsewhere is that people as individual voters have a lot more power in relationship to individual schools and individual children than we do here. And I think we should keep that in mind, even if we're talking about returning to the model of 30,000 kids roughly in a community school district, right? That's still bigger and still therefore more diffuse power than most American school systems. And what I'm not, of course, saying is that most is the sort of sacred right of wealthy suburban spaces to control their school board is never challenged in these conversations. The places that have seen diminished democracy through state takeover, mayoral control, and other forms of takeover are overwhelmingly majority Black and Latino cities. It's just crucial to think of that as the comparison that we're talking about here. I'll stop there.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. I think of Chicago and all these other places, Newark, all these people had to dismantle it. But Heather, I see you come off mute. Go for it.
Yeah, I want to also touch on the last one first. But could you repeat that second question? It was a great question. It's like
Sure. Imagining an equitable functioning school board, what might the configuration look like?
Okay, thank you for whoever asked that question. So I don't know about the configuration, but there was corruption. We know so many people in this chat lived through it. I saw District 14 there. Oh my God. And you know what? There's an elephant in the room here, you know. We haven't talked about the UFT's role in any of this. Okay. So I'll just talk about it through District 14. It was the shenanigans of the UFT and the superintendent that brought, you know, whether it's corruption or just control that pushed people out. So that's a great story, the District 14 story. But so there was, in certain districts, there was corruption, mostly in the Bronx, but not only. But somebody said the tale of two cities, right? That's tale of two different communities within districts, District 8 in the Bronx, the North and the South. There's been lots written about it. So you had districts that were drawn during decentralization, they were drawn to presumably promote integration, combining white neighborhoods and neighborhoods in the Bronx. It was mostly Latino in District 8. So those districts under decentralization, they were not equitable, right? They weren't. District 3 wasn't. That's, you know, it wasn't. There, you know what those lines are in the Upper West Side and Harlem were. So there was lack of equity, there was corruption, there was the UFT and the UFT was part of actually making problems in certain districts, right? And undermining community control. And so I think we have to acknowledge all those, but the question about, well, what would it look like? That's a great question. One thing that I learned from studying community, those very, very short community control period, when those demonstration districts had a life of a year and a half. So they couldn't do much in a year and a half, but they devoted so many educational resources and energy into educating school board members about governing, about democracy, about what it takes to do that. And nobody had done it before, none of the people who were involved. And that's what it's going to take. It's educational, and it's an educational campaign to support people and sustain people to be democratic citizens, democratic participants in governing their schools. So without that, without the resources that we've talked about already, and without that educational work that's involved with governing, then I don't know, you know, so those are critical to moving forward.
Thanks, Heather. Margaret, did you want to chime in on either one of them? You're on mute there you go.
Yeah. My kids always wanted the mute button. No, I mean, I think that we need to go back and look at how the districts are drawn, and maybe part of this whole process is to redraw those districts. Let's get down to the nitty gritty and not tinker around the edges, and so that the districts themselves are drawn to be integrated. And then I go back to, in order for any kind of local control to be integrated, we have to consider some sort of compensation, I think, for the people who get elected, because it's a big strain on families of people who actually get on school boards. It's not a matter of, oh, isn't that cute, they got elected. It's a matter of a lot of time and a lot of work. So I'd like to see us go in that direction. But maybe we need to redraw the districts. Nothing should be off the table.
Agreed with that. Nothing should be off the table. So here we go. I'm going to pose another question. Then we're going to open it up. What I'm going to ask folks to do is raise their hand, and we're going to have our folks keep stack on some of these things. If you don't want to come off and you want to ask them in the chat, feel free. If there's one specific person you want to ask it to, please do that. Panelists, you don't have to answer all the questions so we can get to as many as possible. You can like offset it, and then some people can answer in the chat maybe so we can get to as many questions as possible. We're going to do this for about 20, a little less than 20 minutes. And then we're going to close out with some final things and invite you to the next conversations. But folks want to raise their hand if they want to ask a question.
We had one question already in the chat that I would love
Kaiser.
to invite an answer to. I answered it in the chat, but just so that everyone is aware, Avi asked, would love to hear a little bit about the mechanics of moving away from mayoral control. Who ultimately makes the change? The state legislature through legislation. So whoever wants to field that one and talk a little bit about the process that would be necessary to transition away.
It's a state law that governs education, so it has to go to the state, which is ridiculous. But anyway, maybe we need to change that. Maybe we need to bring it back to our city council. Maybe that should be, if it's New York City, oversees the law. But anyway, right now it's the state that it's a big fat education law that covers everything. Correct, Mr. Jackson, isn't that where it is?
Yeah, Robert.
I think that we should look into it for sure and see if, in fact, because when it comes to education, obviously, the most students in any city is in New York City. And the cost factor, as you know, is, what is it, $38 billion? I just think that we need to look at the actual law and see whether or not it can be changed. And I'll ask my staff to look into it tomorrow. And let's see if it can be changed and just be a decision of the City Council of New York. Get over there. My cat says she wanted to answer the question.
Taylor's with them.
No.
Thank you for that. Get the ball rolling on that, Senator Jackson. I see another one. I don't see any hands, but anybody else have any questions? There's some in the chat too. I think Cleare said, what is the time frame? I'm trying to see exactly. Is that what you said, Cleare? You want to bring it into this space?
Yeah, what are we thinking in terms of a timeline on transition? Are there steps? Are there phases? Are there ideas on how long this could potentially take us to actually have some authentic process?
Well, Chicago's a good example. They're transitioning to a new system. And that might be, so it's over a period of time. First, you have to have what you're going to do, which would require
I think Margaret froze on us as she was dropping the gems.
I just soon chop it off.
Margaret, we missed the whole thing. You got frozen. Can you say what you said again?
Frozen. What was I saying?
Around the timeline.
Yeah, the timeline. I think you have to have the proposal, which will take time. You need a commission appointed and funded to come up with an actual plan. Unfortunately, I think it'll have to go through the state legislature as it stands now, because the state education law has to be changed. And that's how you check. I mean, it's up to the state, because the only way Bloomberg got mayoral control was he went behind everybody's back and offered whatever he did to all the state legislators to vote for mayoral control. to talk about corruption on it. Well, I don't know that for a fact.
Margaret said
I
it.
deep suspicion when suddenly the entire state legislature said, rah, rah, let's get rid of school boards. I mean, where can it be?
So there's another question here, and if someone else wants to jump in on the timeline, I'm going to ask this one first, and if folks want to jump in on something. It's from Jonathan. It says, the city is home to massive inequality. How can proposals for democratic governance avoid exacerbating that inequality? Heather, Ansley, anybody want to jump in on this? Anybody else?
It's inequality from the ground up. The districts are unequal, and the school boards are unequal, and it has to come from the ground up to redesign the districts, and then to make it possible for working parents from every walk of life can run for a school board seat. And the only way they can do that is have some compensation so that they can be a part of it.
Thanks, Margaret. Ansley?
I've been thinking about the way federal systems work, right? Where we have separate structures, but we have a constitution that at least purportedly is supposed to create a set of basic rights that have to be respected in those separate federal spaces. And so in this case, we would talk about, what is a Bill of Rights for New York City students? And what would it mean to think about local scale governance that has to always respect that Bill of Rights for New York City students? I hope that analogy makes sense, but I think that there's some things like whether or not dollars will be justly distributed to students across districts or across schools, that shouldn't be up to debate of local districts, right? But there are other things that absolutely have to be up for debate. I mean, this is where I agree with Heather, right? That exactly what kind of approach to literacy should at least involve teachers and families in that district. So that may not be part of that might be a decision that should be left to the individual and to the individual smaller unit. So that model might be one thing to consider. And the question, right, of what should be decentralized and what should be importantly centralized should be part of the conversation.
I wrote a whole nother thing, a talk, but I had to discard it. And that was about what should be centralized, because I think we've actually learned a lot since the period of decentralization and and we're in a different era. We're in a new technological, everything is different in that sense. So that's a really important discussion. But just to go back to the timeline that Cleare asked about, it's such an important question. What we're talking here today, there's this chat itself is saying, this is going to take time. It's going to take time, and it should take time. So how can we, take the necessary time, get the necessary resource to really deliberate? But we have to know that no matter how good the plan is or whoever, it still goes to the state, and it still gets duked out at the state level. And just the story of what happened in the past, the Republicans loved the idea of decentralization, loved it, because at the time, in the 70s, it meant they could carve out their own districts in the, northern Bronx, and they would be left alone and they could do what they wanted. So that's important to remember. And that could happen at the state level with this proposal that, you have strange bedfellows supporting local democracy. And so we got the strange bedfellows, but what are the guardrails? What is going to make sure that this is done to support equity and not the opposite? So yes. It's going to take time. And I think and then it's going to take the political process in Albany. So, and yeah. that took time too, so.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I'm going to pose two questions and folks should jump in. If anybody want to raise their hand, I don't see a hand, but if you do, if anybody sees a hand, let me know. So August says, are there books that you'd recommend? I know someone put in, I think it was Ansley, Heather's book, but are there any books that you would recommend on community control period and on the Board of Education era up to 2002? And I'll ask one more. This looks like, I think Lorraine, is this a question? Let me just see. Mhm.
I think Lorraine had some ideas around
Okay.
SLT and DLT, which Anna Minsky also asked, what could be the role of SLTs, school leadership teams, and
Mm,
parent associations in a new system? Would we want to change anything about how they are structured?
okay. Anybody want to comment on either one of those?
May I? It's
Sure.
Lorraine.
Sure.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify what I mean.
Oh,
Um, Back in 1980, if you can believe it, I worked under school-based management, and it was kind of like our school leadership team, only it involved all the teachers, all the parents, and all the administrators, and everything we did came by consensus. And we controlled everything that went on in that building. And let me tell you, as a teacher, it was a beautiful thing. It really was. We could interview teachers. We hired the principals. We decided what we needed in that particular school. A counselor we didn't have, a guidance counselor. So we hired one. We controlled the budget, the curriculum, the extra programs, everything. And I really would love to work under that system again. Thank you.
thanks, Lorraine. Anybody want to respond? Otherwise, I'm going to go to, is it Lasana? Lasana, I'm sorry.
Yes, Lasana, thank you.
Lasana, thank you. Please chime in.
Good evening, everyone. So if what Heather is saying is true about the timeline, the reality of time that it would take to implement an alternative governance system or a new governance system, what should we be doing in the meantime as it relates to ensure better outcomes in literacy and math for our kids? While that process is being worked through to create this new model. That's not going to happen overnight.
Jonathan, do you want to chime in at all on this?
Sure.
Yes.
Well, I think that's a great question. So I'm Jonathan Greenberg from the ECC Education Council Consortium. So happy to see all of you here tonight. And we all know that even however long it takes to transition to another model, another school governance system, we have to keep advocating in the present for our schools as they are. That doesn't stop. Not least because nothing is assured. You know, we can go up to Albany and talk to all people up there, and they can say, we're going to do it, and we know that things fall apart and things change and things, end up like we don't want them to. So we can't let go of advocating for the system as it is now, as we have been doing for the past 20 however many years under mayoral control. So that's not maybe a satisfactory answer, but we need to use the levers that we have. Go to the PEP, go to the Panel for Educational Policy, get involved with your local communities, go to your CEC, go be involved in your child's school or the school in your community. All of these things can help. We know that the system doesn't make it easy, and that's what we're trying to change. But we can't stop doing them just because we don't have the system that we want.
All right, so we have two hands here. I'm going to take, it's going to be the last two. And then we're going to move to like close out. I know we can talk about this all day. And it's, again, remember, it's just the beginning. I'm going to go with Celia, then I'm going to let Naquan close us out of the question area. And then we'll start to follow to close out the meeting. But Celia?
Hey, thank you so much for this talk. Speak quick. I just actually wanted to bump other teacher colleague friend of mine's question because it also sort of combines with the question that I was asking about teachers earlier in the chat. But Caro asked, where do the orgs working on a new school governance proposal need support? And also, how can teachers join in the work?
Jonathan, you want to? we have some. You don't have to. I'm wondering if you any part of that you want to respond to.
Well, I mean, the answer is similar to what I said before, is find an organization that's doing this work. And there are teacher-based organizations that are absolutely involved in the fight against mayoral control. And I know we have representatives here from those organizations, the Moore Caucus of the UFT, Teachers Unite. So get involved with them and work with them. And we have coalitions that bring together parent advocates, teachers, community groups, and we're trying to get this off the ground. So, just and do what you can. Again, show up and do what you can.
Naquan, sorry, I was talking and I was saying, Celia, check out the chat, and you probably didn't hear me. Someone's responded to you. Cool. And then Naquan, please go on.
Thank you all. So I'll just make a couple of points. No, not many questions, but just a couple of statements. So I dropped a couple of things in the chat. I dropped school colors. I think that's something people should listen to. I also dropped the Ocean Hill Brownsville, which is my district in District 23, that give you some understanding around the strike. What I will say is that New York City is the only part of the state, and there's over 700 school districts in this state. And New York City is the only part of it that have mayoral control. And I think that speaks to who's in New York City. I think that we cannot be scared by what was in the past or what the future may look like. But I think we need to hold folks accountable to make sure that we have a more democratic governance system for New York City public schools, or New York City Department of Education, or whatever name they want to call it at this time. I'll end by saying, I think, to the question that was asked about what could we do about literacy and math, I think we do what we continue to do. We push the systems that are in place. We push the PEP. We support our community education councils because that's who are on the ground. We support our PTAs and our Title I PACs, which we don't really talk about, but are in majority of our schools that are there to support. Their main objective is to support student achievement, but we don't use them. I think that we strengthen our SLTs and our DLTs. I think there are things that are in place now that we can strengthen as we go through the process of what will be the best governance system for New York City public schools.
All right, Ellen, come on. I said no more, but come on.
It's just an observation. Thank you, OG. It's just an observation. If there are only 844,000 students in the system, the combined numbers of kids with IEPs and kids who are multilingual learners is about 430. That's nearly half of the system. And yet we haven't really looked at the system that provides those services to the children in a, I hate this word, in a holistic way. If we do reform the central board, there has to be more information and more input from families who have kids with either a second language or an IEP. And certainly if we do keep the 32 school districts, those have to have input, not oh yeah, we're including. Everybody wants to use that word. Oh yes, we're inclusive, and nobody really speaks to the issue of what inclusion means for a child with a special need. One of the shining examples, which the state still refuses to continue to extend to the rest of the city, is the children's school. We worked on that. Heather, you were there. We worked on that grant for Margaret. You were there for a year or a year and a half. It's still a successful school 20 some odd years later. And yet no one wants to replicate it. These are the bones that stick in my craw. But somewhere along the lines, we have to take a hard look at the numbers of children that we have in this system who have IEPs or who have a second language requirement. almost at a split level, and we have yet to address that need, either one of them. Sorry, I was on a soapbox.
No soapbox. It's never a soapbox when you talk about children with special needs or any other child. Please, never. Yeah. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to ask these people to grace us with 5 extra minutes. What I want to do, I want to bring Jonathan in because he has some exciting news, I think. I want to close us out, but that might take a little more than 5 minutes. So please give us some grace here. Jonathan, you want to talk about what's next?
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that the ECC has commissioned a report on the history of school governance in New York City, focusing on the mayoral control period and some of the kind of discussions and battles that have gone on during that period. This report will be published this fall, so it's not quite ready yet, but look out for it. You know, however you found out about this forum, you should be able to find out about the report, and it will be free and open to everyone. So I wanted to just give that a shout out.
Thank you, Jonathan, and Education Council Consortium for putting so much energy and effort into this work. A few things. One is I think it's important to shout out folks who have been doing this work for a long time that I don't think we mentioned. So there's a coalition to finally end mayoral control who've been talking about ending mayoral control before. Many of us were like, huh, what is this thing, mayoral control? So that's like includes Dr. Sam Anderson and Esmeralda Simmons. So I want to make sure, which is civil rights attorney Esmeralda Simmons, I want to bring them into the space because they were having this conversation before we are now. We are building off the foundation they already started on this, and they are still in the conversation and part of the conversation. I want to say that the New York State Education Department, you know, they hosted the hearings last year. I think it was last year. It feels like this year, but I think it was last year. And some of you might have testified. I think that's another resource to use. They have really great footnotes with resources and things of nature of like the history of mayoral control. Well, I know Heather's book could be on there. I don't know. But I encourage you to like either go online to the New York State Education Department and their report that came out of it. It's a really great book documented about what people said, the testimonies, etc. The other piece is, you know, the thing that people use as corruption is no longer something they can use because guess what? Under mayoral control, there's been a lot of that too, honey. Right. And I think in the chat, other people wrote about that too, like in suburban districts, like it's just another excuse. It's always some negative, and people said that here too, of why Black and brown voices need to be controlled, just like their bodies need to be controlled, right? And so let's not get caught up in the corruption piece in regards to it being a reason to not look at something different, right? Not that it's not a real thing, but that it should not stop us. Bravery and courage is something we need to triple down and double down on, right? It is in this moment that we sit in, we've seen people be very courageous and bold. We've seen them be very brave. And I think in this conversation, it calls for us to do that too. It is often very easy to sit in what's here and say, let's improve what's here. But if we're saying it's not working, we don't have to. That is a deficit mindset. We deserve abundance. That means of how we govern, is how we govern our children, how we govern our schools, right? We deserve to have an abundance mindset. Our children look to us to have that mindset, to not settle for what is, but to create what could be, right? We don't tell our children they can't have anything. We say you can be anything you want to be. This system can be the thing we want it to be. And I will say that whatever we create and however long it takes us to create this thing, it will not be perfect. There's nothing perfect on this earth. It will not be perfect. And if they give us 20 years to get it right, we're going to get it right. If they give us half as much time as they gave mayoral control to dismantle, disrupt, and create trauma in our system, we can make it work, right? And again, it is not going to be easy. Everybody's not going to be on the same page, but the part of this whole conversation and the further conversation that we're going to be having over the next 2 times is to bring people who can talk about both things, to have newer folks and a mixture of some old school folks who've been here. Like I saw Norm Scott sharing some things that I didn't know and others didn't know. Like once we start bringing each other together, that's how we create the solutions. A wise woman, Mary Hook, said, if we are working towards liberation and we're creating solutions, if we leave anybody out of that, then it's an incomplete solution, right? And so I just want to encourage us to do that. The issues are real. We're not saying they're not real. All the things that people talked about, but they happen in the system too. They happen under mayoral control as well. And so let's be bold and courageous in figuring out and envision something different. One thing I know has been doing educational work for 25 years, and that when you get the right people in the room, they can do anything they want, right? They make the impossible possible. But you have to believe that it's something that we can do. And if you don't, then I get it. It's hard to like imagine. But I will tell you that I've seen the impossible be possible over these last 25 years on different levels. So as we move towards more conversations around this, let's keep the conversation going. Let's talk about the things that were issues, and let's talk about the ways we can make those things change. I think Heather said that. She pointed out an issue and said, but that doesn't mean it has to stay that way. What are the guardrails we can put so that doesn't happen again, right? Systems and people don't want us to change it. It's just not meant to be changed. It's like to keep the same machine going, to keep racism, to keep voices down, right? And so people on this call, and by extension, other folks, I believe in us. And I believe we can create something different, something better, something that works. But we have to believe in it. We have to come together in a really honest way to say that we want to make the change. So I'm here for it. Education Council Consortium is here for it. And at the end of the day, yes, the state has to chime in. But guess what? Many of us have been fighting for that. Now we add on more people to talk to the state legislature to say, hey, this thing mayoral control, we're not down with it, right? Like we need something different. We are building the bigger we, and that's what elected officials will tell you they need to hear from their constituents. And so in the next 4 minutes, I'm gonna give each one of the panelists a chance to just give us a last word of encouragement or anything you want to say. If you could keep it to a minute, that would be great, so we could get people off in time, since I said 5 minutes, extra 5 minutes. So who wants to jump in first? The panelists that we had. Okay, I'm gonna call on you. Margaret, you're from you. Go for it.
Okay. 1 minute.
Yes, Margaret.
Yes. We have to also, I don't know the date that mayoral control is up for renewal, but that's a timeline that we need to work with and think about.
It's up for renewal next year, Margaret. This budget, next
next
budget.
year? No.
2025, 26, 27 budget. Yes, my dear.
Okay. But then we have to have something in place to go up there and raise hell. Maybe it's not going to be accepted, but we should be using that before and let them know we're coming.
Absolutely.
We're coming for them, and that we intend to, if we don't get it done in next year, we will do it in the next 2 years. They should know we're coming.
Thanks, Margaret. Senator Jackson, I see you off mute. You want to chime in?
Yeah, I can say that we should look at the law that basically included mayoral control and work on the bill and that everyone can agree to and sign on to and try to move it. That's extremely important in the process. So as I said, I'll have my staff to pull it up and take a look at it, and let's get to work, because even if they want to say, okay, people will ask the question, what are you going to replace it with?
Right. I see you, Avi. Somebody check out what Avi shared. Heather?
Actually, I want to cede my time to Jonathan, because I thought you all, the coalition, had a proposal for, how we deal with next year and what we propose to eke out more time to work on this. Could you talk about that, Jonathan?
Are we ready to talk about that, Jonathan?
Sure. I think we're ready to talk about it, but I want to make sure the panelists each have some time first before I speak.
Okay, where's Ansley? Did you want to say anything?
I'm headed in a different direction, but I'll be quick. I'm a historian, so what I'm going to do is say that there are people whose stories can inspire you for a long fight. So I'll put these in the chat, but I'm thinking about Ella Baker. I'm thinking about Evelyn Antonetti. I'm thinking about Annie Stein. I'm thinking about Goldie Chu. I'm thinking about May Mallory. These are people who you should know about because they're New Yorkers who fought deeply and hard and sometimes really successfully to make schools better for kids here. And so learn from them.
Dag, Ansley. Okay.
I have one more thing I wanted to say.
Margaret, wait, Margaret, wait, Margaret, wait. Sorry, Margaret. Hold on 1 second. Heather, did you want to say anything? And then we're going to turn to Jonathan, and then Margaret, you can close us out. Heather,
I just wanted to add one name to Ansley's list. It's very close to me, and that's Norm Fruchter.
Yes.
Just to say, you know, all of you, many of your faces bring me closer to him. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Oh my gosh, Norm. Come on, Jonathan, what you got?
So I can tell you what the ECC has been advocating for and what I think what we're planning to advocate for in Albany this year, which is that we recognize that it is going to take time and it's going to take collective, the melding of collective minds to come up with the plan for the next school governance system. So we are advocating for a short extension of the mayoral control law with the mayor losing his majority on the school board, on the panel for educational policy, which would, in the meantime, hopefully bring the balance of power a little bit back to what it should be. But that's not the real change we need. We recognize that. So we are calling for a commission to study and recommend a new governance system. We have been advocating for a commission for many years, and we're not going to stop until we have one. And we hope that we have a mayor who will help us and come along with us and advocate with us in Albany for this commission and for the new system.
Thanks, Jonathan. Margaret, bring us home.
Bring us home. I do think we need to come up with a list of what we want. Jonathan has mentioned that the PEP shouldn't be mayoral. Is there anything else that might come up that we want to adjust for the time being in the state law? And I'm not sure, I'd have to look at the state law again, but certainly the PEP balance, but maybe there's some other things while we're creating this fabulous model.
Thanks, Margaret. Hey, y'all. Thank y'all so much. Kaiser, you're still here. Are there dates for the other two that are coming up?
Yes,
Can you share?
absolutely. December 2nd is the next one. And for that one, we're going to have leaders who have served on the panel for educational policy speaking with us about that experience. And oh, thank you, Alina. Love it. And January 14th is the third panel. So definitely there's a link to register for the second one that was in the chat. I'll put it back in there. And we will send a follow-up email with lots and lots of stuff for you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're keeping it going, y'all. Doesn't mean it has to stop here. Have those conversations locally with your folks too. What do you want to see? Take some of the ideas we have back. Let's generate some conversation around this. Is not going to happen with just us in this space either. With the mayor who said, even at his election when he won around mayoral control and get rid of mayoral control, we know he's serious about it. So let's be ready to provide some ideas and thoughts around what it could be like we were able to do here. And like I said, it's not going to be easy, but I believe it can happen. And I'm excited to take this journey with you, and whatever it looks like, how we figure it out, we will need to go back to the drawing board and shake some stuff out of this, right? So I think we should be clear and honest with folks. It's not going to be right the first time. Most things are not. Even being a parent, you have one, you got two, second one gets a little better, right? So thank you all for joining us, just the beginning. And thank you to our panelists, Senator Cordell Cleare, Senator Jackson, Dr. Heather Lewis, Ansley, and who am I missing? Margaret Kelly, as I live and breathe. Thank you all. Y'all have a good night. We'll have the recording and you'll get a follow-up email with all this stuff, all right? So thank you for participating, and thank you for joining us.
And thank you.
Thank you.